would you support a proposal like the one Donald Trump just made?
Yes, if he could be a reliable messenger for people who rely on IVF. I mean, look, we want people to have access to IVF and fertility treatment. We know that millions of women struggle with fertility at some point in their lives, and many have to turn to IVF or fertility treatment to get pregnant or to sustain their pregnancy. The clearest way that I see us doing that is passing the Right to IVF Act so that we can make sure that every woman, no matter what state she lives in, has access to that treatment. But I think we're experiencing whiplash right now with Republicans saying one thing and then doing another on this topic, along with abortion access and mifepristone and so many other things that are really causing panic, I think, in women across the country.
Well, certainly we have seen a change in the enthusiasm and the leanings of female voters, at least in polling, since Kamala Harris became the Democratic nominee, or the presumptive one at that, Congresswoman. How are you thinking about how her candidacy, and specifically the fight that she is framing on reproductive rights, is having an impact for your colleagues in the House, who are, of course, trying to turn into the majority, not the minority?
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, well before Vice President Harris was the nominee for president, she was traveling all over the country, not just talking about how we can do better and codify Roe and give women the assurance that they'll have access to these treatments that we've relied on for 50 years. But she was also listening to stories, the horrific stories that we're seeing in states with these Republican abortion bans. So she is giving, I think, hope now, to women across the country as she campaigns, as she talks about this from a place of deep knowledge and empathy on what needs to change and what will change when she's president. So I think you are seeing women motivated and organized to get to the polls because, she represents us, our country moving forward and ending the days of us turning back the clock on our, on our children, on our daughters.
This is clearly an important issue for this campaign, Congresswoman, but we're told that none compare to the economy. In the polling that we've seen most recently from Suffolk University, just out in the last 24 hours, close to home for you, but also ABC News, Ipsos, and our own Bloomberg News swing state poll show that Kamala Harris is underwater when it comes to who do you trust to handle the economy, who do you trust to handle inflation. What do you hear from people on the North Shore of Massachusetts? How does she break through in that message with voters in your district?
Yeah, so one, I do think it's going to take a little bit of time. Just keep in mind, she's only been the nominee, for about a month, and she's already going and crafting and talking about her opportunity economic agenda. When I talk to people in Lowell and Lawrence and across, my district, they want their representatives and their next president to focus on bringing down inflation, creating an economy where you can afford a home, you can afford childcare, and making sure our community is safer. Certainly, as we just talked about, keeping politicians out of the doctor's office. But I think what Vice President Harris is really talking about is how we're going to grow our middle class. How are we going to make sure that everybody has access to that opportunity? And you're seeing that through specific proposals, increasing our housing stock by 3 million more units, making sure that first-time home buyers have the ability to put down a down payment. And I think we're just going to hear more of what her specific plans are for, the everyday kitchen table issues that people are really grappling with. But we have, 64 days to the election, and we're going to use every single last day and minute to make sure people know what's at stake.
Well, and of course, those 63 days are likely to pass very quickly. You will be spending some of them back in Washington after a long summer district work period. The return is next Monday. What are you bracing for when you go back to Capitol Hill, knowing that there's going to be a spending fight of some kind that has to go down before September 30th?
Yeah, well, there's no question that we would face another government shutdown if Democrats and Republicans don't come together to pass what's likely going to be a short-term funding bill. Unfortunately, one of the things that we're hearing is that the bill that's being talked about right now, it's riddled with poison pills that Republicans know are going to make the legislation a non-starter.
Are you referring to the SAVE Act?
Yes. And we've been here before. I mean, this entire Congress has been marked with Democrats having to step up and really be the adults in the room to make sure that we avert a debt ceiling crisis, a government shutdown last October. We want to make sure that we come together and we pass a short-term bill without any unnecessary poison pills that are attached to it, so that we can keep the government open and make sure that we protect our economy and the hardworking families back home.
Well, we have less than a minute, Congresswoman, so I'll ask you what we asked your colleague, Congressman Jake Auchincloss, a little bit earlier today. We're on a new stick, a new signal on the radio in the city of Boston, 92.9 FM, so no one can hide from this conversation, Congresswoman. Be careful what you say. I ask you that, of course, in jest. Is it then not possible to tell our audience that we will avoid a government shutdown this year?
Look, I think at the end of the day, we will. No, one, it's not good electoral politics for sure. And I think Republicans have learned that lesson by bringing us to the brink several times. But, we have to stop these partisan games. Attaching the SAVE Act to a short-term funding bill, it's regrettably more politics that the American people are tired of. So I'm going to remain optimistic. We've got a couple of weeks before that deadline to come together and put something that will pass the House and pass the Senate so that we avert that at all costs.